Substance abuse within the homeless community is a growing tragedy requiring more focus and effort from the government as well as the general population of our country. This issue isn't one that can be fixed overnight, but we must educate ourselves and consider how we can help. Places like Skid Row in Los Angeles, California have seen an increase in both homelessness and drug overdose deaths. Just walking down the street, you can find used needles and syringes on the ground.
But why is this a problem?
No safety, no security, no knowing where food's coming from, and
Exactly.
you're seeing people escape the pain of homelessness with drugs. Sign me up.
It provides a warmth, a welcoming. It's not physical. It's not tangible.
Yeah.
It's figuratively speaking. It provides a coat of armor,
Yeah.
and not because you're.
Between 2019 and 2020, there was a 56.7% increase in drug overdose deaths. Kentucky had the third highest rate of drug overdoses in the country in 2020 versus eighth highest in 2019. Knott, Clark, Bourbon, Boone, and Carter counties had the highest overdose rates per capita.
And just to put those numbers into perspective, you can see that all drug overdose deaths in between 2018 and 2021 have surpassed the total number of combat deaths in World War II. Earlier this year, the House passed a settlement of $26 billion with opioid companies for their role played in the opioid epidemic. Since then, the Kentucky Opioid Abatement Advisory Commission has had town halls all across the state to see from the community what they should spend their portion of the money on.
So, but what I hope out of the whole situation is that I hope that we can get more places for safe and sober living where people can feel clean and healthy.
We get the chance to sit down with UK professor Dr. Alex Ellswick about his experiences going through addiction and homelessness and what the relationship between the two is like.
Have you witnessed a substance abuse relationship between any kind of drug abuse and homelessness communities within Lexington?
Oh yeah, yeah, big time, and it's a big problem in terms of equitable access. People who need the people with substance use disorders, and also just people who use drugs who wouldn't identify as having a substance use disorder.
Mhm.
The folks among that population who need help the most are the people who receive help the least. And for a variety of reasons don't have access. So this is just one example of a great many, but the standard for treating opioid addiction are the 3 FDA approved medications, methadone, buprenorphine, and naltrexone. And people experiencing homelessness who aren't engaged with a primary care provider are going to experience a litany of barriers to ever accessing those things. So we see it all the time. One of the ways that we try to address it is we have a mobile unit that we dispatch to locations where people who use drugs will frequent. So the Plasma Donation Center or the Bryan Station Inn, those kinds of motels. And we set up outside and we have a recovery coach on site that can talk to people, certainly get treatment if that's their goal. But for many people in that position, their goal is to improve their housing or to get a job or to get connected in some way. And so that's kind of how we meet people where they are.
Do you think that people become homeless generally because of substance abuse or any kind of drug usage, or do you think it's the other way around?
I ask my students to think of all of the consequences of drug use and addiction. And so all the physical health consequences, the social consequences, the legal consequences, anything you can think of. And we can fill a whiteboard with consequences, right? And then we go back and we say, how many of these are actually consequences of drug use versus how many of these are consequences of society's reaction to drug use? So for instance, most people don't lose their housing because drugs actually make them incapable of staying in housing. Most people lose their housing because someone doesn't like the fact that they're using drugs. The reality is we use non-abstinence as an excuse to deny people the basic human right of housing. And it's the most maddening thing in the world. And then when people continue to be symptomatic in their addiction, we blame them and tell them they're choosing that, even though we're depriving them of something as basic and essential as housing. It's kind of like, you don't have to be an addiction expert to stumble on that one.
But what do you think the best starting step would be overall on either a small scale in a city or a larger scale throughout the country to kind of aiding in substance abuse among the homeless community?
I think we could take a lot of lessons from what's called natural recovery. So natural recovery is people who recover without any formal help. So they don't go to treatment, they don't go to AA, they don't go to counseling. They just sort of organically recover. And the people who are most likely by far to be able to recover that way are the people who have access to the things that they need. So all the things we talked about already, housing and food and employment opportunities and all the privileges. And so what that shows is rather than focusing on coercing abstinence, shoving people who are experiencing homeless into treatment of some kind, instead, if you start by focusing on building assets, then the substance use outcomes actually improve on their own. But we really have it backward. We want people to sort of on their own in a vacuum become abstinent. And then once you do that, then we're like, okay, now we'll house you, now we'll feed you, now we'll provide supports. But that's backwards because the research shows if you just provided those supports in the first place, people would get better, you know?
Yeah.
So it's just a gatekeeping that's kind of disgusting, but it's really prevalent in my discipline, in my field.
Like he said, the problems just keep going in a cycle. In Lexington, some of the resources the city offers to help homelessness are Dismas Charities, Dr. Ellswick's nonprofit, Voices of Hope, and the Hope Center. The Hope Center has many buildings that house the many programs they have to offer, such as hot meals, recovery programs, and employment programs.
Because they don't want to be input with the same crowd. So there's a dignified, safe place that I hope this money will go towards to make sure that these treatment centers and these sober living places are doing just that. Because what I'm hearing not only they want sober living, but they want safe sober living.
This problem won't be fixed overnight, but with the help from the public, we can push for change and have a better and safer community. Also, a reminder given by the City of Lexington, change the way you give. Visit lexgive.com for more.